David sat in his small office, staring at the computer screen that showed his business numbers. Something wasn't right. For the past 3 months, his electronics repair shop had been busier than ever, but somehow the money coming in was getting smaller. He rubbed his tired eyes and looked around his workshop. 15 years ago, he had started this business with just a small loan and big dreams. Now he had 23 people working for him, fixing phones, computers, and selling electronic parts to other shops in town. His customers trusted him, and he was proud of what he had built. But the numbers on his screen told a different story. Sales were up, customers were happy, yet his bank account was shrinking. His accountant, a friendly older man named Robert, kept telling him not to worry. "Business goes up and down," Robert would say with a smile. "This is normal." David wanted to believe him, but something deep in his gut said otherwise. Every night for the past week, he had stayed late in his office, going through receipts and invoices, trying to find where the money was going. His wife Jennifer had started complaining that he was never home for dinner anymore. "Dad, are you coming to my soccer game this Saturday?" his 12-year-old daughter Amy had asked that morning. "Of course, sweetheart," David had replied. But even as he said it, he knew he'd probably be stuck at the shop again, trying to solve this mystery. Tonight was no different. It was almost 11 o'clock when David finally gave up and decided to head home. His stomach was growling loudly. He had forgotten to eat lunch again. The only place still open at this hour was Murphy's Diner on the edge of town, a 24-hour place that served decent coffee and simple food. The diner was nearly empty when David walked in. Just a truck driver at the counter and an elderly couple in a corner booth. David chose a table by the window and ordered coffee and a sandwich from the tired-looking waitress. As he waited for his food, David pulled out his phone and scrolled through his business bank statements one more time. There it was again, that nagging feeling that money was disappearing somehow. Small amounts, nothing that would raise red flags, but over time it added up to thousands of dollars. "You look troubled." David looked up, startled. A young woman was standing next to his table. She appeared to be in her early 20s, with unusually pale skin and the most striking silver-colored eyes he had ever seen. Her dark hair was pulled back simply, and she wore a plain black jacket over jeans. "I'm sorry," David said, confused. He hadn't heard her approach. "May I sit?" she asked, her voice carrying a slight accent he couldn't place. It wasn't Spanish or French or anything familiar. David glanced around the nearly empty diner. Sure, I guess." The young woman slid into the booth across from him. Up close, her eyes were even more unusual. They seemed to catch the fluorescent lights in a way that made them almost glow. "You're David Chen," she said. It wasn't a question. "How do you know my name?" David asked, suddenly feeling uncomfortable. "You own the electronics repair shop on Main Street. 23 employees. Annual revenue of approximately $1.2 million, though your actual profits have decreased by 18% over the last 4 months. David's coffee cup stopped halfway to his lips. "Who are you?" The young woman ignored his question. "Your trust is being exploited," she said simply. "Someone close to you is stealing systematically." "What?" David set down his cup with shaking hands. "What are you talking about?" "Small amounts. Always small amounts. Your warehouse manager takes high-value components during night shifts. Your bookkeeper delays bank deposits by 1 day, earning interest on your money in a separate account. Your assistant manager processes fake returns for items that were never purchased." David felt his heart racing. Those were specific details about his business operations that no stranger should know. "How could you possibly know any of that?" The young woman tilted her head slightly, studying him. "I observe patterns. Humans often miss what is right in front of them because they want to trust. Are you some kind of investigator? Did someone hire you?" "No one hired me," she replied. "But patterns of deception create disturbances. They spread like ripples in water, affecting other businesses, other families." David looked around the diner again. The truck driver was gone now, and the elderly couple was paying their check. Even the waitress had disappeared into the kitchen. "This is crazy," David muttered. "You're telling me my own employees are stealing from me?" "Not all of them, but the ones you trust most, yes." The young woman reached into her jacket and pulled out a small metallic card. It was about the size of a business card, but seemed to be made of some kind of unusual metal that shifted colors under the light. Strange symbols were etched into its surface. She placed the card on the table between them. "Check your inventory records for the past 6 months. Focus on shipments processed during evening hours." Look at your bank deposit timestamps compared to when your bookkeeper says she made the deposits. David stared at the card, then back at the woman's strange silver eyes. Who are you really? Someone who doesn't want to see good people destroyed by those they trust. But how do you know all this? Have you been watching my business? The young woman stood up. Trust but verify, David. Your father taught you that saying, didn't he? David's blood ran cold. His father had died 10 years ago, and yes, he used to say that exact phrase all the time. How did you? But when he looked up, the young woman was gone. David spun around, scanning the diner, but she was nowhere to be seen. The front door hadn't opened, he would have heard the bell. The only other exit was through the kitchen, but that seemed impossible. The waitress emerged from the back. Your sandwich is ready, hun, she said cheerfully. The woman who was just sitting here, David said urgently. Where did she go? The waitress looked confused. What woman? You've been sitting alone this whole time. David looked down at the table. The metallic card was still there, its surface shimmering under the diner's lights. He picked it up carefully. It was warm to the touch and heavier than it should be for its size. I saw you talking, though, the waitress continued, setting down his sandwich. Looked like you were having quite a conversation with yourself. Everything okay? David didn't answer. He was staring at the symbols on the card, trying to make sense of what had just happened. Was he losing his mind? The stress of the business problems, the late nights, the constant worry. Maybe it was finally getting to him. But the card was real. He could feel its weight, its unusual warmth. And the things the woman had said, the specific details about his business. How could his imagination have created such precise information? David paid for his food and left the diner without eating. In his car, under the parking lot lights, he examined the card more closely. The symbols seemed to shift and move when he wasn't looking directly at them. It was probably just his tired eyes playing tricks on him. He drove home slowly, his mind spinning. Jennifer was already asleep when he quietly entered their bedroom. He sat on the edge of the bed, still holding the strange card. Trust but verify, he whispered to himself, his father's old saying. But how could that woman have known? David barely slept that night. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw those silver eyes and heard that slightly accented voice warning him about his trusted employees. By morning, he had made a decision. He was going to investigate. Maybe the mysterious woman was real, maybe she wasn't. Maybe he was having some kind of breakdown from stress. But either way, he needed to know the truth about what was happening to his business. He owed it to himself, to his family, and to the honest employees who depended on him for their livelihoods. As he got ready for work, David tucked the metallic card into his wallet. Whatever happened next, he knew his life was about to change forever. The comfortable world of trust he had built around his business was about to be tested in ways he never imagined. The hunt for the truth was about to begin. David arrived at his shop early the next morning, the mysterious woman's words echoing in his mind. The metallic card sat heavy in his wallet, a constant reminder of the strange encounter. His employees greeted him as usual, their friendly faces now making him feel uncomfortable. Could one of these people he trusted really be stealing from him? His warehouse manager, Tony, waved from across the room. The man had been with him for 8 years, starting as a simple stock boy and working his way up. Tony knew every corner of the business, every supplier, every process. If anyone wanted to steal, Tony would know exactly how to do it. Morning, boss, Tony called out. That shipment from California came in late last night. I got it all logged in the system. David forced a smile. Thanks, Tony. Good work as always. But as Tony walked away, David found himself watching the man's every move. Was there something different about his behavior? Or was David just being paranoid? In his office, David pulled up the security camera system on his computer. His shop had cameras in most areas, but he had never really paid attention to them before. Why would he? He trusted his people. He started with the previous night's footage, fast-forwarding through hours of empty rooms until Tony appeared around midnight to handle the California shipment. David watched carefully as Tony moved boxes, checked items against a clipboard, and typed information into the computer terminal. Everything looked normal. Too normal, maybe? David rewound and watched again, this time taking notes. The shipment had 37 boxes according to the delivery receipt, but he could only count 35 being moved into the warehouse. He watched Tony's movements more carefully. The man seemed to be working efficiently, but there were moments when he moved out of camera range. A chill ran down David's spine. The missing boxes could be anywhere. Over the next few hours, David dove deeper into his investigation. He pulled up inventory records going back 6 months, just like the mysterious woman had suggested. At first, everything seemed fine, but then he started noticing patterns, small discrepancies, a few expensive computer chips here, some high-end phone parts there. Never big enough amounts to trigger the automatic alerts in his inventory system, but consistent enough to add up over time. Most of these missing items had one thing in common. They had all been processed during evening or weekend hours when fewer people were around. And Tony had been the one handling most of these shipments. David's hands were shaking as he cross-referenced the data. The evidence was starting to pile up, but he needed more proof. He couldn't accuse someone of stealing based on just missing inventory. There could be other explanations. He decided to check his bank records next. His bookkeeper Linda had been with him for 5 years. She was a quiet, reliable woman who always seemed to have everything organized perfectly. Her desk was neat, her reports were always on time, and she had never given him any reason to doubt her. But now, looking at the bank deposit records with suspicious eyes, David started to see things differently. The deposits were always made the day after Linda said she had made them. She would tell him on Monday that she had deposited the weekend receipts, but the bank records showed the money going in on Tuesday. This meant the money was sitting somewhere else for a full day. The mysterious woman had mentioned this exactly, earning interest on his money in a separate account. David's stomach felt sick. Linda had seemed so trustworthy. She had even brought homemade cookies for the office Christmas party last year. As the day went on, David found it harder and harder to act normal around his employees. Every conversation felt like a lie. When Linda came to his office with the daily deposit slip, he found himself studying her face for signs of guilt. "Here's today's deposit, David," Linda said with her usual smile. "Busy day today?" "Over $3,000. "Great," David replied, trying to keep his voice steady. "You'll get this to the bank before they close?" "Of course. I always do." But David knew that wasn't true anymore. The money wouldn't reach the bank until tomorrow, giving Linda a full day to do whatever she was doing with it. After Linda left, David sat in his office feeling overwhelmed. 2 of his most trusted employees seemed to be stealing from him. How many others were involved? How long had this been going on? He thought about his family, about Amy's soccer games he had been missing while trying to figure out why his business was struggling. All this time, the answer had been right under his nose. That evening, David stayed late again, but this time he had a purpose. He wanted to watch Tony's night shift routine more carefully. He positioned himself in his office where he could see the warehouse floor through his window. Around 9 o'clock, Tony began his usual evening procedures. David watched through the glass, taking notes on everything the man did. At first, everything seemed normal. Tony checked deliveries, organized stock, updated the computer systems. But then David noticed something strange. Tony made a phone call, speaking quietly while looking around to make sure no one was watching. After the call, Tony walked to a section of the warehouse that wasn't covered by security cameras. David's heart was racing. This was it. This was proof that something suspicious was happening. The next morning, David decided to check that blind spot in the warehouse. He found a small storage area behind some tall shelving units. It looked innocent enough, but when David moved some boxes aside, he discovered something that made his blood run cold. There were electronics components stacked neatly in boxes, items that should have been in the main inventory system but weren't logged anywhere. Serial numbers that matched recent shipments, high-value parts that customers had been asking for, parts that David thought were out of stock. David took pictures with his phone, his hands shaking. This was real. The theft was real, but he needed more evidence before he could act. Accusing employees of stealing was serious business. He needed to be absolutely certain. Over the next 2 weeks, David became obsessed with gathering proof. He installed a hidden camera in the blind spot of the warehouse. He started tracking Linda's banking patterns more carefully. He even followed her to the bank one day, watching from his car as she made the deposit 24 hours later than she had promised. The evidence was overwhelming, but it was also devastating. These weren't strangers who had broken into his shop. These were people he had trusted, People he had invited to company barbecues, people whose families he knew. David barely slept during this time. Jennifer noticed his strange behavior. "You're acting weird lately," she said one morning over breakfast. "Are you having problems at work?" "Just some business issues," David replied, not wanting to worry her until he knew the full extent of what was happening. "Dad, you missed my game again," Amy said quietly. David looked at his daughter's disappointed face and felt terrible. "I'm sorry, sweetheart. There are some things at work I need to fix, but I promise things will get better soon." He hoped that was true, but honestly, he had no idea how much worse things might get before they got better. 2 weeks after his investigation began, David was sitting in Murphy's diner again, going through his evidence for the 100th time. He had photos, bank records, inventory discrepancies, and even video footage from his hidden camera showing Tony moving items to the secret storage area. It was overwhelming and heartbreaking at the same time. "You look tired." David's head snapped up. The mysterious woman was standing next to his table again, just like before. Same pale skin, same silver eyes, same slight accent. "You," David whispered. "You're real." She slid into the booth across from him. "Did you find what you were looking for?" David stared at her, still not quite believing she was there. "How did you know?" "How could you have known all of this?" "The patterns were obvious to anyone who knew how to look," she replied simply. "But it's worse than you said. It's not just Tony and Linda. I think there are others involved too." The woman nodded. "Your assistant manager processes fake returns. 2 of your warehouse workers help move the stolen items. Even your part-time shipping clerk is involved." David felt like someone had punched him in the stomach. "How many people are stealing from me?" 7, she said quietly. 7 people you trusted have been taking from you for almost 2 years. 2 years? David's voice cracked. "Why didn't I see it?" "Because you wanted to trust them. Trust is not weakness, but it can be exploited by those who choose to betray it." David put his head in his hands. "What am I supposed to do now? Fire everyone? How do I even know who I can trust anymore?" The woman reached into her jacket and pulled out another metallic card, similar to the first one but with different symbols. She placed it on the table. "The choice is yours," she said. "But remember, allowing theft to continue hurts not only you but also the honest employees who depend on your business to survive." When David looked up, she was gone again. Just like before, she had vanished without a trace, leaving only the strange card as proof that the conversation had happened. David picked up the card, feeling its unusual warmth. Tomorrow he would have to make the hardest decision of his business career, but tonight, for the first time in weeks, he knew exactly what needed to be done. David didn't sleep at all that night. He sat at his kitchen table with all his evidence spread out like pieces of a puzzle that formed a picture he didn't want to see. Bank statements, inventory reports, photos from his hidden camera, and the 2 mysterious metallic cards that seemed to glow softly in the dim light. 7 people. 7 people he had trusted were stealing from him. Jennifer found him there at 6 in the morning, still in yesterday's clothes, staring at the papers. "David, what's all this?" she asked, concerned. "You look terrible." David looked up at his wife, his eyes red from exhaustion. "Jen, I think I'm about to lose everything." He told her everything. About the mysterious woman, about the investigation, about what he had discovered. Jennifer listened without interrupting, her face growing more worried with each detail. 7 people, she finally said. "David, that's almost a third of your staff." "I know, and I don't even know if there are more." Jennifer sat down next to him and took his hand. "What are you going to do?" "I have to set a trap. I need to catch them in the act so there's no doubt. No way they can deny it or claim it's a mistake." That morning, David arrived at work with a plan. He was going to create a fake shipment, expensive items that would be too tempting for the thieves to ignore. But first, he needed to install better cameras without anyone noticing. He called a security company and arranged for them to come in over the weekend to install hidden cameras throughout the warehouse. He told his staff it was just routine maintenance work. "Nothing to worry about," he told Tony. "Just upgrading some old equipment." Tony nodded and smiled, but David thought he saw something flicker in the man's eyes. Suspicion? Fear? Or was David just imagining things? On Monday morning, David put his plan into action. He created a fake delivery of high-end smartphone parts worth over $10,000. On paper, it looked like a legitimate shipment from a supplier in Texas. He even had fake invoices printed up to make it look real. The shipment consisted of empty boxes with just a few real phone parts on top to make them look authentic. Each real part had a tiny tracking device hidden inside that David had ordered online. David made sure Tony was the one assigned to process the shipment. He watched through his office window as Tony went through the fake boxes, checking them against the fake invoices. Everything looked normal, but David knew the test would come later, during Tony's evening shift when fewer people were around. That night, David stayed hidden in his office with all the lights off, watching the live feed from his new hidden cameras on his laptop. At first, nothing happened. Tony did his usual routine, checking real deliveries and updating the computer systems. But then around 10 o'clock, Tony made that same mysterious phone call David had noticed before. This time, David could see Tony's face clearly on the new camera. The man was definitely talking to someone about the fake shipment. After the call, Tony walked over to where the fake boxes were stored. David held his breath as he watched Tony look around carefully, making sure no one was watching. Then Tony opened one of the boxes and examined the smartphone parts inside. What happened next made David's stomach turn. Tony took several of the parts and walked them over to the hidden storage area David had discovered. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was that Tony wasn't alone. Linda, the bookkeeper, emerged from behind some shelving units. She had been hiding there the whole time, waiting. David watched in shock as Linda and Tony worked together, counting the stolen parts and putting them into different boxes. But they still weren't alone. David's assistant manager, Carol, appeared from another direction. Then 2 warehouse workers, Mike and Steven, joined the group. Finally, David's part-time shipping clerk, Jason, came running in from outside. David stared at his laptop screen in disbelief. All of them were there, working together like a well-organized team. They had done this before many times. They moved with practiced efficiency, each person knowing exactly what to do. Linda was taking photos of the stolen items with her phone, probably for their online sales. Carol was updating what looked like their own private inventory system on a tablet. Mike and Steven were repackaging the parts into unmarked boxes. Jason seemed to be the lookout, checking the windows and doors to make sure no one was coming. Tony was clearly the leader, giving quiet instructions to the others. David watched as his warehouse manager, man he had trusted for 8 years, divided the stolen goods into different piles. The tracking devices David had hidden in the parts would tell him where these items ended up, but he didn't need to wait. He was watching them steal from him right now on camera with perfect clarity. David felt sick. These people hadn't just taken his money. They had made him doubt himself. They had sat in meetings where he worried about declining profits. They had listened to him talk about having to delay raises and bonuses because money was tight. They had looked him in the eye and lied over and over again. The worst part was realizing how long this had been going on. 2 years, the mysterious woman had said. For 2 years, these people had been stealing from him while he blamed himself for the business problems. As David watched, the group finished their work and began to scatter. Linda left first, carrying a small box to her car. Then Carol, Mike, and Steven left together. Jason waited a few minutes before leaving. Tony was the last one, cleaning up any evidence of what they had done. David sat in his dark office feeling completely betrayed. These weren't desperate people stealing food to feed their families. This was organized crime, a business within his business that was slowly destroying everything he had built. He thought about all the times he had praised Tony for his dedication, all the times Linda had stayed late to help with the books, all the times Carol had volunteered for extra projects. They had been using his trust against him. David's phone buzzed with a text message. It was from the tracking app showing that his hidden devices were moving. One was heading toward the industrial area on the south side of town. 2 others were moving toward a residential neighborhood. He grabbed his keys and followed the strongest signal. It led him to a storage facility 20 minutes away from his shop. David parked across the street and watched as Tony's car pulled up to one of the storage units. Tony got out and opened the unit with his own key. Inside, David could see shelves lined with boxes. Lots of boxes. This wasn't just about the smartphone parts he had used as bait. This was much bigger. David took photos with his phone, making sure to capture Tony's license plate and the storage unit number. He sat in his car for another hour, watching as Carol and Linda both showed up at different times, each adding boxes to the collection. By midnight, David had enough evidence to put all of them in jail. But he felt no satisfaction, only a deep sadness. These people had been like family to him. He had celebrated their birthdays, attended their weddings, given them raises and bonuses when the business was doing well. As David drove home, his phone rang. It was an unknown number. "Hello?" David answered cautiously. "You found what you were looking for." It was the mysterious woman's voice, that same slight accent. "How did you get this number?" David asked, pulling over to the side of the road. "The question is not how, but what will you do now?" "I'm going to call the police. I'm going to have them all arrested." "And your business? Your remaining employees? Your family?" David hadn't thought that far ahead. "I don't know. I'll figure it out." 7 people, David. If you fire 7 people at once, especially if it becomes a police matter, your business will be damaged. Customers will wonder what else is wrong. Your remaining employees will be afraid for their jobs. The news media will make it a story. David felt overwhelmed again. So what am I supposed to do? Just let them keep stealing from me? No, but consider your approach carefully. Sometimes the best way to cut out an infection is with precise surgery, not by burning down the entire body. The line went dead. David stared at his phone, then at the photos he had taken at the storage facility. He had the evidence he needed, but now he had to decide what to do with it. When he got home, Jennifer was waiting up for him. "Well?" she asked. David showed her the photos and videos from the hidden cameras. Jennifer watched in silence, her face growing angrier with each image. "All of them," she said finally. "David, they all knew. They were all lying to your face every single day. I know. You have to fire them. All of them, tomorrow." David nodded. Jennifer was right. He couldn't let this continue for another day. These people had betrayed his trust, stolen his money, and put his family's future at risk. They had made their choice, and now he had to make his. As he got ready for bed, David looked at the 2 metallic cards the mysterious woman had given him. In the morning, he would use the evidence he had gathered to confront the thieves. But tonight, he tried to prepare himself for what would be the hardest day of his business career. 7 people who had seemed like family were about to discover that their betrayal had consequences. And David was about to learn whether his business could survive losing 1/3 of its workforce all at once. The only thing he knew for certain was that after tomorrow, nothing would ever be the same. David arrived at his shop at 6 in the morning, 2 hours before anyone else was scheduled to start work. He had barely slept, spending most of the night organizing his evidence and rehearsing what he would say to each person. His hands shook as he unlocked the front door. The first thing he did was change all the passwords and security codes. He updated the computer system, the alarm codes, and even the locks on the storage areas. If things went badly today, he didn't want anyone to have access to areas where they could cause more damage. Jennifer had offered to come with him for support, but David knew this was something he had to do alone. These people had worked for him, trusted him with their problems, and he had trusted them with his business. The betrayal was personal, and the confrontation had to be personal too. At 8 o'clock, his employees began arriving for work. David watched from his office window as they parked their cars and walked into the building, laughing and talking like it was any other day. Tony waved at him through the window with his usual friendly smile. Linda brought coffee for herself and Carol, just like she did every morning. Looking at them now, knowing what he knew, David felt angry and sad at the same time. How could they act so normal? How could they look him in the eye and pretend to care about the business when they were slowly destroying it? David had planned to call them into his office one by one, starting with the people who seemed least involved and working his way up to Tony, who was clearly the leader. He wanted to give the minor players a chance to confess and maybe work out some kind of deal. At 9 o'clock, David called Jason, the part-time shipping clerk, into his office first. Jason was only 19 years old and had been working at the shop for 6 months. David hoped that maybe the kid had just gotten caught up in something bigger than he understood. "Jason, sit down," David said, trying to keep his voice calm. "I need to ask you about something." Jason sat down, looking nervous. "Did I do something wrong, Mr. Chen?" David pulled out a photo from his hidden camera, showing Jason acting as a lookout during the theft. "Can you explain this?" Jason's face went completely white. He stared at the photo for a long moment, then put his head in his hands. Oh no, this is bad. Jason, I need you to tell me the truth. How long has this been going on? The young man started crying. I didn't want to do it, Mr. Chen, I really didn't. But Tony said if I didn't help, he would tell you that I was the one stealing things. He said no one would believe me over him. David felt a mix of anger and pity. Tony had been threatening this kid, using his authority to force Jason into helping with the thefts. How long, Jason? Since I started working here. Tony approached me during my second week. He said it was normal, that everyone did it, that you knew about it but didn't care as long as it wasn't too much. David's heart sank. Tony had manipulated this teenager into thinking the theft was acceptable, even authorized. Jason, I want you to know that I never authorized anything like this. What Tony told you was a lie. Jason looked up with tears in his eyes. I'm so sorry, Mr. Chen. I wanted to quit so many times, but I needed this job. My mom is sick and we need the money for her medicine. David believed him. Jason was clearly the victim here, not the criminal. Jason, I'm going to have to let you go, but I'm not going to press charges against you. I want you to write down everything Tony told you to do. Every conversation you remember. Can you do that? Jason nodded eagerly. Yes, sir. I'll write down everything. Next, David called in Mike and Steven, the two warehouse workers who had been helping move the stolen goods. Unlike Jason, these men were older and had been with the company longer. They should have known better. Mike came in first. When David showed him the photos, Mike immediately became defensive. This isn't what it looks like, Mike said quickly. We were just helping Tony reorganize some inventory. At 10 o'clock at night? In a secret storage area? Mike, I have video of you putting my merchandise into unmarked boxes. Mike's story fell apart quickly. Under pressure, he admitted that he and Steven had been helping Tony for over a year, but he claimed they thought Tony had permission to take the items. Tony said you knew about it, Mike insisted. He said it was like a bonus system for senior employees. David shook his head. Mike, you've been here for 3 years. You know I don't run secret bonus systems. You know this was wrong. When Steven came in, he tried the same story, but David could see the guilt in both men's faces. They knew they had been stealing. They might have told themselves Tony had permission, but deep down they knew the truth. David fired both men on the spot and told them to clear out their lockers immediately. He would decide later whether to press charges. Carol, his assistant manager, was next. David had hoped that maybe Carol was less involved, but the video evidence showed her actively participating in the theft operation. When Carol sat down in his office, she immediately went on the attack. David, I don't know what lies people have been telling you, but I hope you're not believing them without proof. David silently placed several photos on his desk, showing Carol sorting stolen goods and using her tablet to manage what appeared to be their private inventory system. Carol stared at the photos, her face going through several different expressions. First shock, then anger, then resignation. How long have you been watching us? She asked quietly. Long enough. Carol, you've been with me for 3 years. I promoted you to assistant manager because I trusted you. Why would you do this? Carol's shoulders slumped. Do you know how much money Tony was making? He showed us his bank statements, David. He was making more from selling your stuff than you were paying any of us in salary. So you decided to steal from me because you thought Tony was making more money. It wasn't just about the money, Carol said, but her voice lacked conviction. Tony said the business was doing so well that you wouldn't even notice small amounts missing. He said rich business owners expect some loss. David felt disgusted. Carol, I'm not rich. This business supports my family just like your jobs were supposed to support yours. Every dollar you stole came out of my daughter's college fund, my wife's security, my employees' raises. Carol started crying, but David felt no sympathy. Unlike Jason, Carol was an adult who had made deliberate choices to betray his trust. Next came Linda, his bookkeeper. Linda had been manipulating his bank accounts, delaying deposits to earn interest on his money. When David confronted her with the evidence, Linda broke down completely. My mother has Alzheimer's, Linda sobbed. The care facility costs $3,000 a month. My insurance doesn't cover it all. I was desperate. David felt a moment of sympathy. But then he remembered all the times Linda had sat in meetings where he worried about money problems that she was causing. Linda, if you had come to me and explained your situation, we could have worked something out. I could have given you a raise or helped you find resources for your mother's care. Instead, you chose to steal from me while watching me struggle to understand why my business was failing. I know, Linda whispered. I know it was wrong. I wanted to stop, but Tony said if anyone got caught, we would all go down together. Finally, it was time for Tony. David had saved the warehouse manager for last because he knew this conversation would be the most difficult. Tony had been with him the longest, and the betrayal felt the most personal. Tony walked into the office with his usual confident smile, but David could see wariness in his eyes. Hey boss, busy morning. I saw Mike and Steven leaving with their stuff. What's going on? David didn't say anything at first. He just started laying photos and printed emails on his desk, one by one. Tony's smile faded as he realized what he was looking at. Tony, I trusted you, David said quietly.
For 8 years, I trusted you with everything.
I was planning to make you a partner in this business. Tony's face hardened. You want to talk about trust? You've been spying on us, installing secret cameras, following us around. What kind of boss does that? The kind of boss whose employees have been stealing from him for 2 years. 2 years? Tony laughed bitterly. David, you have no idea how long this has been going on. You think this started 2 years ago? I've been taking stuff since my 2nd month working here. David felt like he had been punched. 6 years? You've been stealing from me for 6 years? You made it so easy, Tony said, his friendly mask completely gone now. You trusted everyone, never checked anything twice, never questioned why inventory was always a little short. You were the perfect victim. Why, Tony? I treated you well. I gave you raises, bonuses, responsibility. I invited you to my home. Tony stood up, his face angry. You gave me scraps while you got rich off our work. You think your little raises were enough? I was doing the work of 3 people while you sat in your office counting money. Tony, I wasn't getting rich. The money you stole was supposed to go back into the business, into better equipment, into raises for everyone. Sure it was, Tony sneered. Just like you were going to make me a partner someday. You business owners are all the same. You promise everything and deliver nothing. David realized that Tony had convinced himself that the stealing was justified. In Tony's mind, David was the villain and Tony was just taking what he deserved. Tony, you're fired. I want you to clean out your locker and leave immediately. Don't come back to this property, Tony. The news of the mass firing spread through the small town like wildfire. By noon, David's phone was ringing constantly with reporters, customers, and other business owners wanting to know what had happened at Chen Electronics. David gathered his remaining 16 employees in the main workshop and told them everything. He showed them the evidence, explained how the theft ring had been operating, and answered their questions honestly. Some were shocked, others said they had suspected something was wrong but hadn't known what to do about it. I know this is scary, David told his remaining staff. You're probably wondering if your jobs are safe, if the business can survive losing 7 people at once. I want you to know that I'm committed to making this work, but I need your help. Over the next few days, David learned just how deep the damage went. Tony hadn't been lying when he said the theft network extended beyond David's business. As David investigated further, he discovered that employees from 3 other local businesses had been involved in buying and reselling stolen goods. The police took David's evidence seriously. Detective Rodriguez, who handled the case, told David it was one of the most organized employee theft rings she had ever seen. These people weren't just taking things randomly, Detective Rodriguez explained. They had a whole system set up. Online sales accounts, fake business licenses, even a small warehouse where they stored everything before selling it. Tony, Linda, Carol, Mike, and Steven were all arrested within a week. Jason cooperated with the police and avoided charges in exchange for his testimony about how Tony had manipulated him. But the legal process was just the beginning of David's challenges. Running the business with 16 people instead of 23 meant everyone had to work harder. David had to take on many of Tony's responsibilities himself, working 12-hour days to keep everything running smoothly. The financial damage was worse than David had initially calculated. The police investigation revealed that over the past 2 years alone, the theft ring had stolen more than $200,000 worth of merchandise. Going back further, David estimated the total loss at over $500,000. His insurance company agreed to cover some of the losses, but not all. David had to take out a loan to keep the business operating while he rebuilt his inventory and hired new employees. The hiring process was particularly difficult. David found himself questioning every applicant, wondering if they were honest or just good at hiding their intentions. He implemented new security measures, better cameras, improved inventory tracking systems, and regular audits. Some customers were understanding about the situation, but others took their business elsewhere, worried about dealing with a company that had been so thoroughly compromised. David lost 3 major accounts in the first month after the arrests. The local newspaper ran a story about the theft ring with the headline, "Local business owner fires entire staff after discovering theft." The story made it sound like David had overreacted, and some people in town began to view him with suspicion. Maybe he wasn't paying them enough. David overheard someone say at the grocery store, maybe they felt like they had no choice. These comments hurt deeply. David had always tried to be a fair employer, offering competitive wages and benefits. He had celebrated his employees' successes and supported them through difficult times. To have people suggest that he had somehow driven his employees to steal felt like being blamed for his own victimization. 3 months after the confrontation, David was working late in his office when he heard a familiar voice. "You look tired." David looked up to see the mysterious woman standing in his doorway. He wasn't even surprised anymore. "How did you get in?" "I changed all the locks." She ignored his question and sat down across from his desk. "How are you managing?" "Honestly, it's been the worst 3 months of my life.
Half the town thinks I'm the villain.
I'm working twice as hard for half the money. Some days I wonder if I should just sell the business and start over somewhere else." "But you haven't." "No, I haven't." David leaned back in his chair. "My remaining employees have been incredible. They've worked extra hours without complaining, learned new skills, helped train the new people we've hired. If I gave up now, I'd be letting them down too." The woman nodded approvingly. "And the thieves?" "Tony and Linda got 2 years in prison. Carol got 18 months. Mike and Stephen got probation and community service. They all have to pay back what they stole, but most of them don't have any money left. Justice, but not satisfaction." "No," David agreed. "The money they stole is gone. Even with insurance and the court ordering them to pay restitution, I'll never recover most of it. But honestly, the money isn't what hurts the most anymore." "What hurts the most?" David thought for a moment. "The trust. Not just that they betrayed my trust, but that I can't trust the same way anymore. Every new employee, every business decision, every time someone asks for a favor or special consideration, I find myself wondering if they're trying to take advantage of me." "Trust. But verify," the woman said, echoing his father's old saying. "Yeah, but it's hard to live that way. Constantly checking up on people, questioning their motives. That's not the kind of boss I wanted to be." The woman reached into her jacket and pulled out one final metallic card. This one was different from the others. Simpler, with just a single symbol etched into its surface. "What does it mean?" David asked, taking the card. "It means you learned the lesson. Trust is not weakness, but it must be earned. Verification is not suspicion, but responsibility. You can build a business on trust, but you must protect it with wisdom." "Who are you really?" David asked. "I need to know." The woman smiled for the first time since he had met her. It transformed her face completely, making her look almost human despite her unusual eyes. "I am someone who has seen many businesses destroyed by unchecked betrayal. Someone who believes that good people deserve protection from those who would exploit their goodness." "Are you some kind of investigator? Government agent?" "I am someone who notices patterns that others miss. Someone who can see when trust is being abused before it destroys everything good that was built on it." David stared at her, still not understanding. "Will I see you again?" "Only if you need to. But I hope you won't." This time David watched carefully as she left. She walked to the door normally, opened it normally, and stepped outside into the parking lot. But when David followed her a moment later, the parking lot was empty. No car, no footprints, no sign that anyone had been there. David looked down at the metallic card in his hand. It was warm, just like the others, but as he watched, the symbol on its surface began to fade until the card was completely blank. 6 months later, David's business was stronger than it had ever been. He had hired carefully, implementing thorough background checks and probationary periods for new employees. He had installed better security systems and created checks and balances that made theft much more difficult. Most importantly, he had built a new culture based on transparency and accountability. Employees understood that trust was earned through consistent, honest behavior. And that verification wasn't personal. It was just good business practice. The new employees appreciated the security systems because it protected them from false accusations. The honest workers liked knowing that dishonest people would be caught quickly. The business ran more efficiently because everyone understood their role and responsibilities. David's relationship with Jennifer and Amy had also grown stronger. The crisis had taught him the importance of balancing work and family. He made sure to attend Amy's soccer games and spend time with his family every evening. "Dad, I'm proud of you," Amy told him one night as he tucked her into bed. "I know it was really hard when those people were stealing from you, but you didn't give up." "Sometimes I wanted to," David admitted. "But I realized that giving up would mean they won, and I couldn't let that happen." 1 year after the confrontation, David received a letter from Jason, the young man who had been manipulated into helping with the thefts. Jason had gone back to school and was studying business administration. "Mr. Chen," the letter read, "I wanted you to know that losing my job at your company was the best thing that ever happened to me. It forced me to take responsibility for my choices and find a better path. I hope someday I can run a business with the same integrity you showed, even when it was hard." David kept that letter in his desk drawer as a reminder that sometimes doing the right thing has consequences you can't predict. 2 years later, Chen Electronics was more profitable than it had ever been. David had learned to balance trust with prudence, kindness with accountability. He had built a business that was both successful and ethical. Sometimes, late at night when he was working in his office, David would take out the blank metallic card and wonder about the mysterious woman who had warned him about the theft. He never saw her again, but he often thought about her final words, "Trust but verify." It had become more than just his father's old saying. It had become the foundation of how he lived and worked. David never found out who the woman really was, or how she had known about the theft ring. But he was grateful for her warning, because it had given him the chance to save his business and protect the honest people who depended on him. In the end, that was what mattered most. Not solving,